to the American Theatre Wing seminars on working in the theater. These are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, located in the heart of Times Square, 42nd Street, where Broadway, off-Broadway, and off-Broadway theaters all meet to bring to you the magic of theater. This is a wonderful city, and every year millions of visitors come to New York to go to the Broadway theater. They come here, and when they see theater, they bring the report of it across the country. We have theaters playing here now, and their product goes out across the country. And from the country, from the resident theaters and the university theaters, come their product to New York in order to feed and enhance the theater. These seminars that are coming to you are an outgrowth of the Wing School. We are perhaps very well known for the Tony Award, one of the most prestigious awards in the theater. That's the Carrot. But year-round, the American Theatre Wing, as a service organization, says theater, and services the community through the theater. Our hospital show programs go out to shut-ins, to people in private hospitals, nursing homes, and AIDS centers. We have a program that services young children in schools. On Saturday mornings, they line up, they buy a ticket to see a live show. No child is ever turned away. And we think that that is the habit that will last with them to the rest of their lives, so that they go to the theater as a need, not just for a show that has the longest run or the best reviews. We have had seminars on the performance, on the play script and director, and today's seminar is on the producers, those people who make it possible to bring everything together, to put their knowledge, their money, and their instincts on the line to bring theater to not only New York City, but today across the world. Today's seminar is on the production A Few Good Men. And here to introduce our panelists, Jean Dalrymple, who is a member of the Board of Directors of the American Theatre Wing, has been a producer and a director, and George White, who is president of the O'Neill Foundation, who is a producer and a director. And without any ado, they're going to bring what it is to work in the theater from the eyes of the producers and how it happens right here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, and thank you, Isabel. I will start by introducing on my far right Mr. Stuart Thompson, who is the general manager of A Few Good Men, or do we want to change that to A Few Good Persons?
There's one woman.
Oh, yeah, yes, okay, there we are. And to my immediate right is Bernard Jacobs, who is the president of the Shubert Organization. And now I will turn you over to my colleague, Jean Dalrymple, who will introduce the rest of our panel.
Thank you. I have the honor of introducing the only lady on our seminar, and her name is Linda Lehman, and she is representing the advertising organization that makes those wonderful ads that make us all go to see the play. And it's a very important job that she has with the advertising agency of Serino Coyne, Inc. And right next to me I have the man, and that's the producer. And the producer is the one who really puts the whole thing together. And he has been doing that for many years, and very, very well. And his name is David Brown, a very well-known name. And I repeat it because I'm told that sometimes no one hears who the producer is, and it's David Brown again.
Well, go ahead, Jean.
No, go ahead.
I thought we might start with the producer, because there seems to be, historically, people have always said, what does a producer do? What do they do? And there's a lot of myths, a lot of bad jokes, a lot of good jokes, actually, about that. But I think, if I may ask you, David, to start and tell us about what you do, and even from the beginning of where do you get the script? And how do you get the script? Does somebody throw it over a transom, or do you actually get it via an agent, or how? And then take us a little bit through what you do. And then maybe we can go to Bernie and talk about how that then relates to a theater.
Well, the producer is a person of many, many responsibilities. Sometimes he or she is the person who handles the box lunches. Sometimes purely a money raiser. Sometimes the creative, the visionary. I like to think that Lewis Allen and I, who produced A Few Good Men, are in the latter category. The way it all happened was that I was in and am in a motion picture producer and had no inclination to go into the theater. And like many things in life, it was accidental. I saw a play titled A Few Good Men and attempted to buy the film rights. The film rights were not available because Aaron Sorkin, the playwright, said, I want a first-class theater production. And although he was living on a cot in Soho or in the East Village, he would not be tempted. And so I acquired the stage rights, and knowing nothing about the theater, or in some cases the movies, which is the first qualification of a producer, I said, who knows about the theater? It was my colleague and friend Lewis Allen. I sent him the play. We saw a run-through, a reading of it, and I found myself in the theater. Well, we found ourselves with a play that required, what, Stuart, cast of 9? Or how many people do we have in our cast?
21.
21 people, an unknown playwright, an unknown play, and an ambition to go to Broadway. Well, obviously, we consulted. First of all, we got Vassar, and we started this play
at the University of Virginia.
University of Virginia in Charlottesville. Lewis Allen, being a distinguished alumnus of that university, they built our set. They funded the original production. We cast it. But as we were doing that, we went to Bernie Jacobs and Jerry Schoenfeld and anyone. We knew that if we had 21 actors, we needed 21 producers to finance it. And so the number of producers of A Few Good Men exceeds the cast of most plays these days by a handy number. Well, Bernie and Jerry were terrific, and I mustn't forget Suntory of Japan and Kathy Levin, and so many others who came along, and of course the Kennedy Center, because we went from the University of Virginia directly to the Kennedy Center. They took us on. It was very scary. We had no commitment to go to Broadway until Washington, and but the answer is, to your first question, George, is that the play came from an agent, a man named Richard Crowitz of the Agency of the Performing Arts, and grew from there. Indeed, it did grow.
Did the Schuberts want to come down to Virginia and see it before they gave you a commitment?
The Shubert commitment, I think Bernard could answer that.
We were committed before I went to Virginia. The only thing is that based on Virginia, we had an out, as I recall.
Indeed, you did.
If we didn't like it in Virginia, we could abandon it at that time.
And I've neglected to mention the most distinguished along with Jerry and Bernie, Robert Whitehead and Roger Stevens were enormously supportive. In the darkest hour, they believed in this play, as did the Schuberts. And anyone who tells you the Schuberts are just thinking about money doesn't know the history of A Few Good Men. This was a straight play, and the idea that they would take a chance and give us one of their great theaters was an inspiration, and really very instructive to me. I never thought things like this happened.
What decided you on this?
We liked the play. I mean, what makes you decide on any play? You throw the script up in the air, and if it hits the ceiling and sticks to it, why then you like it. If it doesn't stick, why then you let it fall down and you abandon it. But
this stuck.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. Bernie, let's go a little farther with that.
Well, I remember when I was back at law school, they used to say, the professors did that, and if it stuck to the ceiling, you got an A, otherwise you got some lesser grade.
Well, what are the kind of, I know this is a really rough question because there's so many, the disparity of works is so broad, but what are the kind of things you look for in a work that influences you. And I will reinforce what David says about the Shubert Organization looking for just the hits, because the history of distinguished work is quite extraordinary. So I will say that for you. So you and I mean it. But what are the things that go through your mind when you see something?
Well, the first thing I think of is appropriate for the Shubert Organization. I have in my own head what the standard should be of what we want to produce, and certainly, despite what those people want to disparage us might say, if we don't think it has quality, we won't have anything to do with it. And this obviously was a play of quality by a young playwright who should be encouraged and hopefully will write better and more plays in the future, so that it was the kind of play that we should become involved in. For that reason, we did become involved in it.
Bravo. Yeah, it's true.
Were the other producers on when you went into Virginia, or did one by one did you bring them?
They were on, and except that I think the Kennedy Center was in.
Kennedy Center came in
and
afterwards.
I want to emphasize that again on the creative side, the Shuberts and Bob Whitehead, for example, we had endless sessions with the playwright, who was young. I won't say stubborn, but I will say firm in his conviction, and wrote very long. And it was only not the threat of the Shuberts, but the suggestion of the Shuberts that they would not be paying for anything that was performed after 11 o'clock in the evening, because the curtain would come down. And
You understand what 11 o'clock means, don't you?
No, what does that mean?
Well, if the curtain comes down at 1 second past 11, you are into another hour for stagehand employees. And there's an abhorrent thought to us that we should ever have to pay the stagehands overtime. It's bad enough they get what they get for straight time, let alone paying them overtime.
For those of you who have seen A Few Good Men, there were many changes in the play brought on not by the producers and and an author who really was willing to work. And but starting in Virginia, it worked. It worked brilliantly, and it was a big hit at the Kennedy Center. I think it was for a play that was again unknown. But the meetings, the casting sessions, the painful replacements, and all of that went on. And the whole odyssey of A Few Good Men is an inspiration to many people, because it shows that an unknown playwright and a straight play can make it to Broadway and actually make it on Broadway.
Stuart, which brings up the next question that people often ask is, what does a general manager do? But it does interact, obviously, with the producer. But I think a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of how you relate once you get the play.
Sure.
And how you also work with the theater owners and the producer and all that.
It depends on whether it's a good day or a bad day, really, what I do. But the process is, once a producer engages a general manager, the first thing they want is a budget. So they'll know what it costs. So that obviously involves studying the script pretty carefully and doing a lot of research into what kind, not research, but doing a lot of checking out what kind of lighting, whether it's going to be expensive lighting, whether it's going to be an expensive set, to have a guess at the operating costs, how many stagehands, how many actors, whether there are stars, what they'll cost. Then working with the production attorneys on the offering papers, if there are any. That's where the process begins. It then goes on to negotiating actors' contracts, negotiating the director's contract, even negotiating the author's contract if the producer hasn't done that prior to engaging the general manager. And while the terms are pretty standard for an author's contract in terms of royalty in advance and so on, there are all sorts of other things, per diem, travel, what future rights the producers have and so on. Working with the press agent, working with the ad agency a lot, through the producers, reporting back to the producers on everything that's going on. And once a play's opened, being responsible for the accounting to the producers and the investors through the show accountant, replacing actors, dealing with the casting director, trying to narrow it down to a field for the producers to come and see, the director and the author to come and see. negotiating contracts for the replacements. It never seems to end.
How do you train for this?
Yes, that's what I
How do you learn to do this?
By accident.
By learning?
I began as a stage manager in opera, and just learned about the theatre from various different sides. I also worked in publicity and theatre in Australia, which is where I'm from. And I worked in management in theatre in Australia and here, and just picked it up along the way.
And it's all about the same, isn't it? Whether it's there or here.
Pretty much so.
Yes.
Yeah. There are more unions on Broadway than I think there are anywhere else to learn about.
When you look at sets, are you able to determine with your knowledge that this kind of set with a revolving stage would cost that much more money, but if you did not use a revolving stage, you would not have to have that many more stagehands, and therefore it would cut the cost, and pass that knowledge on to the producers? And is that part of your job, or is that
Yeah, I
the
think
director?
that's part of a general manager's job, to find out what the director and the set designer see the set as being. Also, often even before there's a set designer, you can look at a script and tell whether the set's going to be an expensive set or a simple set, and pass that on to the producers, sure.
I've sensed that over the last even 10 or 15 years, in the old days, I think Bernie could reconfirm this, that the old general manager's job was to say no. You know, can I have no? Do you want no? But I think there seems to be a much more interaction now, and it seems that they also come by way of being stage managers, as you did a little bit in understanding that. I want, if I may, move over to Linda and ask, now that you've got this play, this by an unknown author, and it's at Serino Coyne, and you are the, if you will, the account executive on this. What do you look for? I mean, where do you go? What do you do in terms of determining how you are going to, if you will, market this property?
This is very hard work because we don't have a star.
Exactly.
I mean, in this case, we did have a star, but we didn't have a known quantity in terms of a playwright. We had a drama that was a military drama as well as a mystery drama. So we tried to isolate the individual elements that might be appealing to the audience. What the agency does is really create the identity that people will see up to the point that they come to the theater. So everything that you think about a play before you get there is done through the advertising. So I feel my job is to make you aware of what the play is about, enough to make you want to see it. And in this particular case, we determined that the military aspect of it would be appealing to a lot of the potential audience, and we worked very closely with the producers in coming up with the look of the poster, the art that would be carried along with the show. We went through a very funny little sort of side note. The girl in the artwork up there, she's the only woman on stage. She's the only woman in the play. It's a few good men and one great lady. You know, that's sort of how we looked at it. And so it was very important that her attitude in how she was relating in this drawing to the rest of these people be perceived as a tough lady, but also somewhat sensitive. So I think we drew her probably 4 or 5, 6 times before we finally hit one that everybody liked and said, yes, that's this woman. And so even to that extent, we will go into sort of fine detail to set the tone properly. And then the flag design came from the graphic designer. He put it together with the artwork, and I think it's a very nice piece of art. I think you can't miss that marquee as you walk down the street. And that's the image that the show has for anyone who hasn't yet seen the play. Other than that, we had Tom Hulse at the beginning, and that was a good thing for us. We initially started with just print and a little bit of outdoor, and after the show opened, we did some television.
Wait a minute, you said print and outdoor.
Print.
Would you go a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah, that's in
Technical
talk.
In talk, yes. Newspaper advertising in the New York Times and others. Radio, we did a lot of radio at the beginning to set the tone, and we did some very nice mood evocative radio that once again set the military tone with a drum roll at the beginning and an announcer that says something like, on July 7th, such and such, you know, it was very sort of, it gave you a mysterious feeling because we were also pushing the mystery a little bit. And then we went into television after the opening, right, Stuart?
I'd like to describe something, George, if I may. As a freshman, one of the most traumatic experiences is the advertising meeting after the opening of a play. The Danish is out there, the coffee is out there. We're looking desperately for quotes.
Right.
Where frequently there are no quotes. And I've mentioned to Bernie Jacobs and Jerry Schoenfeld, I said, I've learned something about the theater at these meetings. There's only one good week, and that's between Christmas and New Year's if it doesn't snow. The worst week in the year is just before the holidays, except directly after the holidays.
Right, right.
Then comes Lent and the Jewish holidays.
Right.
Then comes summer, when it's either too hot or
4th of
people are at the
July.
beach. And I said, is this the business that we're in? Well, they said, it is in a way, but you have to have a hit. You just have to have a hit. And what makes a hit is word of mouth. This all pertains to advertising. And I think it was the decision of the Shuberts and the rest of us to kick in with advertising money so that the word of mouth could catch up with the play. There was a cartoon in the New Yorker showing a group of producers exulting over a great Frank Rich review, obviously. And the line under the cartoon said, one of the producers said, but what will we do when the word of mouth catches up with us?
Well, this show had great word of mouth. That was, I mean, it was very exciting because it was out there and it was going. And that, in fact, that's why we went to the television, was to get it out faster.
Who made the decision to take the money and have enough money for word of mouth to take on?
Well, those producers, you know, these guys.
Few.
We made the decision early on because we ran out of money that we'd have to put in more money. I mean, and that's those are the kind of decisions that separate the men from the boys in this business. I mean, you budget the show for X $100,000, and all of a sudden you find out that X is no longer there, and you have to bring in Y in order to try to make the show work. And at that point in time, you either closed the show, and there was some kind of opinion that we should have done that, or you continue to run the show. In this instance, the opinion was that we would try to see if we could make the show work. And at that point, we were almost dead in the water, because the reviews were not as good as we think the play deserved. We knew the word of mouth was good, but how do you get a word of mouth out there? So we elected to put in more money, to spend money on the making of a television commercial and the airing of a commercial, and that's a decision that even for a little play requires a commitment of a couple of $100,000. We made that decision, and we went ahead, and eventually the play found an audience. We got back our overcall. We got back a little more money over that. Will we ever recoup?
It's possible, yeah, sure.
I like the big smile.
There's, well, one thing that David hasn't mentioned is that there is a film sale on this play.
There's going to be a great movie based on this play. I'm convinced of it. It's...
But isn't that, when you said you made this decision, isn't that we're an organization that has long been in producing, has the money to go ahead with this, whereas the things that we're seeing now with new producers coming on and getting just enough money to hold them for opening night, and if it is not a rave review, they haven't any reserve and they can't wait for a word of mouth.
Well, that depends upon whether or not a play is properly budgeted. If you properly budget a play, you don't run out of money after the opening. You have a substantial reserve there in order to fight the reviews if they're adverse, or to promote the show, even if you have good reviews, because sometimes good reviews do not necessarily make an audience. This play was budgeted appropriately, but we ran out of money anyway because of the fact that the play did not do as well as we thought it would do in its various venues. So at that point in time, the decision was made: do you close the show now, or do you put up additional money? We made the decision to put up additional money. Now, very often, that's a foolhardy decision. In this instance, it proved to be the correct decision.
Well, that's a tough one to make, and I know, I mean, Gene, you've been a producer, and you know too, but you have had experience, and Bernie, you have too. I think, and it came up in a recent seminar, that there are a lot of people who are not experienced. I mean,
Right.
are in another, experienced in some other line of work and call themselves producers.
Well, Man of La Mancha was done by inexperienced producers, and it was dying, and it was going to die, but the mother of the author put up the money to keep it going, and it became a tremendous hit.
We go back to, let's take what you mentioned on the budget. We take a figure 100% and break that down, and can you do that in this unbusinesslike business of what percentage goes for advertising, what percentage goes right down the line? Can you
Well,
do that?
Stuart can answer that.
Do you want to
probably
do that?
best,
Can you
but
run
the
it quickly of
but-
taking it a whole and breaking it down to show us where the monies go to make
in
up?
I was going to say, before he does that, I mean, if he's appropriately prepared a budget, all of these items are covered in the budget. And if the budget, again, is appropriate, there's an adequate reserve to cover contingencies, and if all of that is done, well, then you don't run out of money.
What's the biggest item in the budget?
Generally, well, in the Few Good Men budget, the biggest item was the reserve, from memory. Once we opened A Few Good Men, we had preview losses budgeted, and we did have reasonably substantial preview losses, which most shows do, unless they have a built-in star or a built-in appeal. We then got to, and we were under budget in other areas, we then got to the day after opening with, I think, about 180,000 in reserve, if my memory serves me correctly, but that wasn't, I think the television commitment the producers made was about $180,000. So had we used the reserve for the television commitment, there would have been nothing to sustain the losses that can happen in the first couple of weeks of a play. So if my memory serves me correctly, that's why the producers made the decision to put in extra money for the TV campaign, of which we only used 50% of their commitment, because after about the third week on Broadway, we started to make money each week. I think right up to around Christmas week, we started to make money each week. The conventional wisdom, and maybe Linda can answer this about what percentage goes to advertising, is that if you're opening a play that doesn't have stars, doesn't have a built-in appeal that will pre-sell it, you try not to spend too much on advertising before you open, because chances are it won't increase the ticket sales dramatically. Once you try to save the advertising for money once it has opened, and you want to spread either the reviews or the word of mouth or get people to know about the play. So I think prior
You
to...
had a fairly short preview period also.
we had only
so they
about
moved
2
in and
weeks
just-
of previews
right.
because we'd been out of town for 6 weeks. So on A Few Good Men, I think on a $780,000 budget, we probably only spent $40,000 for advertising before we opened.
See, one of the factors here in advertising is producers are always criticized by actors, by creative people. Why aren't you advertising this show? Why aren't you spending more money on advertising? But today, a full-page ad in the Sunday Times, which is generally considered to be the prime place to advertise, costs with mechanicals close to $50,000.
Yeah.
At $50,000, if you budgeted a play for say $500,000, $600,000, which is a pretty good budget for a small play like this, well, each time you run one of those ads, you're spending 10% of your budget. It's a lot of money. So you've got to be very careful about how you spend your advertising dollars. And if your advertising dollars do not result in ticket sales at least equal to what you've spent on advertising, why then you're a very foolish person.
What does
Thinking directed at somebody.
picking up on that, Gene, you mentioned La Mancha and being in trouble, and I don't know. We talked about the judicious decision to go a little farther. What happens? What goes? How do you then? Let's say a play is in trouble, but you believe in it, and let's forget for a moment A Few Good Men. But in general, what goes through people's minds, the producers, and how do you? What do you go to try to save a situation if you believe in the play?
Well, you go to the Schuberts if you know them.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, I think as David knows, in publishing there is a motto that you can't start a fire, but you can fan a flame.
That's it.
And that's it. If it's not there, but if you find a nugget there, and there is a bit, as in A Few Good Men, that word of mouth began coming in. But you have to have enough knowledge there to know it's going to be there.
If you have an advance, if you have a pre-sold property, either in the theater or in publishing or in movies, you build up a considerable advance, and that advance brings enough people to the theater either to condemn the play for future theater goers or to give you an opportunity to get through that period. A Few Good Men had virtually no advance. I don't recall one. Do you, Stuart? And therefore, from day one,
There were no group sales.
none. From day one, we were
Why
living.
was that?
We were living on our own fat, which was very little, and we had no. Well, because we didn't have. I don't know what the group sales.
Well, I think there were two reasons we didn't have substantial group sales. One was, again, what Linda said about what the ad agency faced. We had an unknown playwright, unknown director. Tom Hulse is certainly a star, but
Carrying a lot of other things with
there. I'm not sure that was enough to sell groups. Also,
also
the
a difficult
decision to
description.
make, because of the timing of the show, we were 2 weeks at the University of Virginia in September, 4 weeks in Washington in October, and the decision to bring the show into New York wasn't made until after it opened in Washington. So we would have been in the position of spending money before we knew the play was even coming into New York on group sales work.
How do you get group sales? How does that come about? If you have a star, I understand it, but apart from that, do you audition? Is there a market that representatives of group sales go to?
Well, the
Yeah.
group sale people think that they know what's going to be the hit all the time. And they primarily sell to their groups and to their parties those shows which they think are going to be easy for their groups and parties to sell and make money on. They are not the least bit interested in fostering the art form by trying to get people to buy tickets to shows they don't necessarily want to see. So that Miss Saigon will open with, I don't know, maybe 30-some-odd million. I think we have 30-some-odd million now. A play like, and maybe it'll pick up another 10 million between now and the opening. On the other hand, a play like A Few Good Men will open with an advance of $75,000 or $100,000, and that's not 1 week's capacity to start with. And you know, the history of plays, of serious theater, either on Broadway or off Broadway, is that you really have to motivate people to go to see them. They want to go to see comedies, they want to go to see musicals, but straight plays on a serious subject matter, what the devil? I want to go out and enjoy myself. I don't want to be lectured to. I don't want to be. I don't want to learn anything in the theater. I go to the theater and have a good time. Unfortunately, too many people think that way.
But fortunately, you can do both. You know. Where does a press agent come in? Do you work with a press agent? And who?
We sort of work in tandem, but I really can't speak for them because that's, I mean, we're sort of both functions that move the audience to see the show. We do the paid portion, they do the portion that comes from the press.
Well, as an old press agent, I'll tell you. You find somebody in the cast who is interesting and has an interesting story, and you use all of your efforts to get that person on the air and to be interviewed and to get that story, if possible, in the Sunday Times. And in that way, you sometimes get people to go to see a very serious play with a very interesting actor in it. And I did that in many, many cases and really turned the play around. And I think that if there is one interesting person in that cast, you can do it.
You never thought
Tom was
of
very, I mean,
selling this as Mozart and Tom Hanks as a Marine? That might have worked.
everything you've heard is
Well, yes,
Yes, right.
yes, absolutely. Maybe he had some wonderful experiences that would
Well,
almost
he
make
did do a
front
lot
page.
of.
Yeah.
We wrote our own
Interviewing.
quotes, Gene, for a while. I think it was Jerry Schoenfeld who said, "The best courtroom drama since the Caine Mutiny, court-martial." We said, "Jerry, but who said that?" And he said, "I said that." And then finally, somebody did say that.
Yeah.
So we got that, but it starts with the authority of print. It's so interesting what you say. Because, wouldn't you say also that today we don't have the kind of people writing, for those who might remember Alexander Walker or Walter
Yeah,
Winchell,
right.
could make a play in defiance of critics. I mean, they would just,
Yes,
and we do have some
absolutely.
wonderful people. Liz Smith does a
That
great
does
job.
it, yes,
But they're very important
Yeah.
to a play.
yes.
I'd like to go back again to the producers. You've got the property, you had the agent submit it, and you thought it was very good, and you've got Jerry and Bernie interested in it. What is the role of the other producers that then came in, and how did they come in, and why?
Well, they came in because Lewis Allen and I
Right.
invited them. We sent them the play. We beseeched
What-
them. We did what Gene
What
Dalrymple
was each
said.
one's role? How did they
The
did they
same.
sit in on making the decision?
To the degree that they wished to, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
In the case of Robert Whitehead, to an extraordinary degree, and Lewis Allen and I, but Bob Whitehead, in a way, wouldn't, I think, spearheaded, the author thing. He had a great belief in the play. Both Bernie and Jerry attended readings for actors, had
And
many
decisions
comments.
then were made at these meetings on the
Absolutely,
whole, right?
absolutely, and no decision was made without a kind of consensus.
We had a very democratic group,
Yes,
remarkably so,
I would think so.
and also a very congenial group.
Well, the producer always, of course, is, as we've alluded to here all along the way, the specter of and the exigencies of economics play a tremendous part in here, more and more. I guess it always has. But and of course we know that as you said, Bernie, the prices are extraordinary now. When you said $50,000 for an ad, I can even remember the days when that was what you would put on an off-Broadway show for the cost of an ad in the Times. Also, do you have, because of the other side of the economics, is the impact of a show like A Few Good Men running on Broadway, what that does for the city of New York and all of the concomitant parts of any kind of filter effect with restaurants and hairdressers and everybody else. Does the city of New York help you with this because of the because of that impact of the arts?
Well, the city helps us by landmarking our theaters in such a way so that they make it more difficult for us to function. They help us by always threatening to tax us in one way or another. They help us by, I guess generally, by being about as uncooperative as any municipality can be. I mean, particularly in the Koch years, going back to Lindsay, Lindsay at least loved the theater and always came to the theater. Mayor Koch, I don't think I saw him in the theater twice during his 8 years as mayor.
But he saw A Few Good Men.
He did.
Does the theater?
I think
The theater, in my opinion, is New York's greatest resource. It's a thing that separates New York from every other city in the world, with the possible exception of London. And it should be treated as if it's a precious piece of property. But unfortunately, in this day of shortage of money, all governmental agencies, the theater is looked upon by the city, and I guess by the state and the federal government too, is how we get some money out of those fellas in order to reduce our tax burden. I mean, it used to be that when people bought tickets to the theater, on their federal tax return they could deduct the cost of the tickets if it was for business expense. You now can only do that for a portion of the price of the ticket. And how they apportion it, God only knows, is always subject to audit. And obviously, as government will desire to get more money, it will increase that percentage, or decrease the percentage that will be deductible. so that unless we're not looking for subsidies, but we do want help in terms of the fact that we do not want to be faced with adverse taxing situations. We do not want to be faced with the lack of appropriate police protection and all the other things that we need. We are overregulated, overtaxed, and to a large extent underappreciated.
London,
I think that
Isabel, London now is making a big attempt to get money from their government. It's been all over the papers for the last few days. They say that the London theater will die unless the government helps them.
Well,
but to subsidize them, actually.
I think that theater owners and theater producers who have been in this business for a long time do not use the clout that they have with the city. I think it is so important to be more forceful than you are with what it is that you give the city. You talk about taxes and you talk about hotels and restaurants, but the periphery, the money that goes around the city. Nobody has ever asked me, what's in Bloomingdale's windows, but they want to know what's playing on Broadway or off Broadway, and then they would go to Bloomingdale's, and they will go to Saks, they would go to the institutions around the theater. And I think that's where your importance and your power comes into the city. And I don't think it's been organized or used well, if you forgive me from this end of from the American Theater Wing, but I care about the theater and I care about the community. And I think it's important that our government is made more aware of the contribution of the theater to the city. And that's, I think organization is the answer for it. Otherwise, we ought to threaten to succeed from New York City. Go out to Hollywood, and then they'll bring us back. They'll woo everybody back with great treatments and great, stipends and things. Let's go on to the producer after that. We're off the subject.
We talked a little bit about this in the last seminar of the role, how I alluded to it earlier, how the role of the producer has shifted a little bit over the years, and we were talking about people like Kermit Bloomgarden and Herman Shumlin and people like this, who really were very much into the script and were almost, and I imagine, again, economics played a part, but they were very, very strongly, not necessarily one-man bands, but they were pretty much czars as producers. Is this mitigated by the fact that there's so much money necessary that and there's such a amount of money needed to you have to get more people, and therefore it becomes more of a committee than it used to be? Is that the reason?
That's true, and there's talking about $50,000 for an ad and $50,000 for an off-Broadway play. I put on Broadway plays for $50,000, and they were completely mine. They were, the money was all either from me and my friends, no one else. So it belonged to us, and we could do what we liked about it. But today, you go out and you have 14 partners, and I think that's very difficult for the theater.
Wasn't it, if I may say so, in the case of A Few Good Men, we were extremely fortunate. There was no interference by a committee, even though we were a large number. Most of it was, we worked with the director. I don't think we ever vetoed anything except length. And we really listened very carefully. And in some cases, we were in favor of selecting an actor, and the director didn't want that actor, and later he had to replace and get the actor that we originally wanted. But in the case of A Few Good Men, it was line by line vetting of the play script. We were fortunate in that we didn't have a star playwright. We were not in a situation where he could dictate to us, so that he learned something and we learned something. We were very fortunate. But when I think back at those great producers who really, including yourself and Dwight Deere Wyman and Gilbert Miller and so many, they had complete control. We don't have control of our actors because the theater is not a way to make a living for an actor compared, unfortunately, to television and film.
What do you mean you don't have control as a producer?
It is very difficult to get a run-of-the-play contract with an actor. you can only hang on to that person. The turnover in A Few Good Men is, what would you estimate it?
Well, actually, we've been lucky. It's been fairly low. We've had 2 stars in the lead role, Tom Hulce and Tim Busfield.
Did you know that was going to happen when you opened the theater?
Well, Tom Hulce had signed a 6-month contract, and it was actually quite a battle with his agents to get him to sign for 6 months.
Yes,
It's the love of the theater that motivates actors to stay in the theater when they can earn a great deal of money elsewhere, wouldn't you say? And we've been fortunate to have an ensemble play that did not depend wholly. And matter of fact, there's been very little difference in the box office, you know, with cast changes.
But I want to say a word for
your replacements. I want to know how many replacements you've
Isabel, just to offset that, the money thing. There are many, many actors who will do plays for no money, the way they used to do for me at City Center. You know, I had people like Tallulah Bankhead, who was getting $5,000 a week, who came to City Center and worked for $65 a week, and I paid her made $100. she wanted to play a streetcar named Desire, and she came and did it. And Charlton Heston came from California, where he was getting, I don't know, $500,000 a picture, and worked for $65 a week because he wanted to do Mr. Roberts.
Well,
but of course that was for
get
2
the property
weeks.
that will intrigue
Absolutely.
the person, the star. But how many have you had?
We're on to really our 2nd generation of casts. As we approach our 1st anniversary, we've had 2 lots of 6-month contracts expire, and the majority of the cast are renewing beyond the 2nd 6 months. Ron Perlman is now playing the role of Jessup, which Stephen Lang originated. Stephen was in it 6 months. Ron will have been in it almost 6 months now. He may renew, we're not sure yet.
So they buy tickets to see A Few Good Men, the show, not the star that's in.
Well, we don't want to say that. They want
not
it.
true.
Our stars are the thing.
No, because there are fan clubs and that
Sure.
sort of thing is a part of it too. But this show has taken on its own identity, and it is the show in toto. If it has stars in it, also that's nice, that's good. But it's not. I mean, people are coming to see the story.
They're coming to see the performances, wouldn't you say,
To
too?
go
And
back-
that's where, yes.
To go back
Yes.
to the production of it, you said that you had a movie sale, a film sale
Yes.
for A Few Good Men. Does that money then go into a pot of all the
yes,
producers? How is that handled?
Well, the proceeds of the sale of the film rights go to the author and then to the investors of the play. And I think a proportion of what, 40, 60?
It's 50, under the Dramatists Guild contract, new contract, 50% of the film sale goes to the production entity and the author retains 50%.
Yes, and it actually, and under the deal, since I negotiated the deal for the film rights before I knew it was going to be a play, we also get a weekly sum under the film deal. Certain amount of money is paid for each profitable week which goes to the author and to the proprietors of the play. Everyone always says, what happens to a play when the movie gets on? Well, some plays have survived the movies. I give you a chorus line, which came and went long after and the play, The Sound of Music, oddly enough, a great hit, survived the play in London. And in this instance, we have a remarkable auspices for the movie, Castle Rock Entertainment through Columbia Pictures. I'm a producer, actually, and Rob Reiner will be the director, I rather think. Great director. But this is sometime in the future and will not impede the immediate...
Before that, will you be going on the road? Will you travel with A Few Good Men?
We're
travel?
planning a tour
Yes.
for 91, 92 at the moment. It's in the planning stages, but there seems to be a lot of interest.
And how will that be handled? Will you take that on, or is it going to Shubert theaters? Or
We'll,
you're not going to commit yourself?
we'd
are
like
you?
to go to as many Shubert theaters as will have us, but probably we'll work with a booking agency. There are a number of agencies which book road tours, Columbia Artists, Roadworks, and so on. And so they, in effect, act as the production's agent to make the bookings.
Are they independent of the producers in New York City that have produced the show?
Well, they're in fact, if the tour happens, probably it would be produced by the New York producers who would hire the booking agency to be its agent on the road.
Linda, do you do all the packaging for that?
It totally depends.
It does.
If we're asked to do so, we certainly do. Sometimes it isn't a part of it. It just depends
We
on the
have,
deal.
our office has True on the Road at the moment, which was a play that ran last season on Broadway, and now it's out on a national tour, and Serino Coyne did the advertising for that, and they supply all the advertising materials for the road.
It depends on what the producer wants.
And this is the independent producer that took True out?
No.
No, it's
These
the New York
producers.
producers,
New
of
York.
which David is one and Lewis
I
Allen
see.
is another. But we work with a booking agency which knows the road, and they make the bookings. But we provide the show.
And Stuart negotiates the onerous terms.
Speaking
hope.
of that, there is, or not really of onerous terms at all, but I wanted to ask Bernie a little bit about, there has been a shift. I remember when you and Jerry really became the, quote, Schuberts, unquote, and the change really has happened since I think you have been at the helm, where in the old days a theater owner, am I right, was primarily a theater owner and didn't really get, and really almost like a rental of it. But you people have always been very much involved with the artistic part of it as well. Isn't that true? And isn't this a shift in the last, let's say, 20 years or so?
Well, we believe we have diametrically, dramatically changed the way theaters participate in production. In other words, whereas before us it was typical the theater got its rent, God knows what, and if the theater didn't get its rent, why then you closed the show. We have worked out all kinds of deals in which the theater participates in the success of the show and also participates to a lesser extent in the failure of the show, because it should be primarily the producer's risk as to whether or not the show is or is not successful. So we have changed the terms under which most theaters are booked, and there also has been a dramatic change or change underway in which even the royalties of the royalty participants are becoming more and more instead of in direct percentages of gross, they are also becoming participants in whether or not, in the money that's earned in excess of what it costs for the raw cost of running the show. And really to pay royalties or to pay a theater rent out of the budget of the production budget is, in our opinion, manifestly unfair. So we have been advocating both for ourselves and for other royalty participants that their share should be based upon the money that's earned in excess of the direct costs of the labor that goes into the show on a weekly basis. So to that extent, we have changed the conditions under which theater booking contracts are negotiated to a large extent, but we also have changed with the participation of most of the unions. The only holdout we've had has been the SSD&C, which is the Directors and Choreographers Union, and we are in the process of negotiating a new agreement with them under which they will join in the various formulas under which we present shows.
How do the unions operate, the unions and guilds, when they make an agreement with one group of theater owners? Does that apply to all?
Oh yes, there's a there are very few unions that have national contracts. Most of them have. You have a separate stagehands union in Boston, Philadelphia, New York, and Washington, and every other locality all over the country. And the same thing is true with most of the other people who work in the theater, except the managers work on a national contract, the actors work on a national contract, and of course whatever agreement you have with the Dramatists Guild is national. Other than that, everything else is done on a city-by-city basis, and costs will vary from city to city, just as the expenses of labor in order to support themselves vary from city to city.
Do you think that the minimum wages that have been settled by guilds and unions are in part the reason for the rising cost in tickets, theater tickets?
Well, let's put it this way. In my day, you went into the subway for a nickel. What is it now, $1.15? That's an increase of 23 times. Now, theater tickets from the very bottom to where they are today, they've only increased about a multiple of 10 or 11. And I think if you take most items of expense in our society, I remember when you bought a loaf of bread for 9 cents. Today you pay $1 for the same loaf of bread, and maybe it's not as good as it was when you paid 9 cents for it.
You could eat a loaf of bread and stuff your stomach. You didn't have to have the meat and the potatoes with it. When you buy a theater ticket, there's so much more that goes into it. There's, you know, the dinner and the babysitter and the parking and all of the things, because it makes it terribly expensive to go to the theater.
Well,
and yet there are a lot of people that want to go.
Well, the answer again is that if you want to buy a ticket to Phantom of the Opera, they're very hard to find, and if you'll call any of the brokers in Jersey who advertise in the New York Times and in other periodicals and tell you you want Phantom tickets, call a number, and you will find that they are asking 10 times and getting 10 times what we get at the box office. Now, there's something outrageous about that, that people in New Jersey who have no connection with the theater are making 90% of the cost of their tickets, and we, on the other hand, are coming very close to breaking even between the cost of what we present and the price of the tickets. So that it's...
but I don't think we can have those few people out there only come into the theater on that enormous amount of money that they're willing to spend, and then you have the smaller play, The Few Good Men, who will not attract that kind of money. And somewhere there has to be a happy medium in there where we can get the people into the theater at the cost of a ticket that will not say it's a great big event. On this point, we'll have to take a break right now and come back for questions, and I hope that you will be ready for it. The reason I brought up the ticket price was that that's what is constantly being asked in our seminars, is why the cost of the ticket? We can't afford to go to the theater anymore.
Well,
so please take a break and then come right back.
Let me just give you some figures which justify the cost of tickets.
I think we have to stop at this point. Save it for when we come back. Everybody, stand up, take a glass, do whatever you want, but come back quickly.
This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
We're continuing on the American Theater Wing seminars on working in the theater. And these seminars are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Today's seminar is on the production, the people who make it all take place and make it all happen, so that the theater is that magic world that you come to, and there is nothing else like it. Today's seminar is on the production of A Few Good Men, and we have the people that have made it possible and represent the people behind them who have worked with them to make this possible. George White and Jean Darrow will continue as co-moderators of this seminar on the production.
Thank you, Isabel. I wanted to pick up where we left off with Bernie Jacobs talking about the realities of production, which relate to the costs, for instance, of the different union scales. Would you run it down for us a little bit, Bernie, about, for instance, what do stagehands get? What do they get for overtime? Jean mentioned that too. We talked about 11 o'clock, what happens after 11 o'clock. How many unions are involved in your, let's say, A Few Good Men, in that production? And then we'll go on to the musicians as well later on.
Well, maybe let me answer that question my way.
Okay. All right, fine. Please.
We go back to, what was it, 1958, My Fair Lady was produced. CBS put up all the money, and the production cost $300,000. And they got their money back in 10 weeks. Cameron McIntosh is going to do Miss Saigon. It will cost in excess of $10 million. and he's lucky if he gets his money back in more than a year. With a hit show, which will never have an empty seat during that whole period of time. Fiddler on the Roof cost 5 years later, cost $500,000. And they also got their money back in around 10 or 11 weeks. The economics of the theater have reached a point where the costs have gone up, and the time in which you can recoup in a high-risk business has been extended 4, 5, and 6 times. We did the Jerome Robbins show, for example, which cost in excess of $10 million. During the run in New York, we did not recoup, a run of close to a year and 3 quarters, and hopefully with a tour in Japan, with everything else, we may be fortunate enough to get our money back. So the economics, and that's with a $60 ticket. The economics are such that ticket prices are going to go up. George talked about stagehands. When I came into this business, the base wage for a stagehand was around $90 a week.
How long ago was that?
Well, this goes back around 57, 56.
Okay.
Today, the base wage of all the people in the theater is climbing up towards $1,000 a week. Equity set the standard with the base wage in its last contract of $900. They were aiming for $1,000, but of course now they've just deferred their desire to get $1,000 by a few years. But it isn't just the $1,000. It's also that if you go back 30 years, you did not have these benefit programs, which means that in addition to the wages that you pay for pension and welfare and Social Security and all the other things that cost money, you've got to add another 35 or 40% to the wages. So if you're paying $1,000 a week, you're really paying $1,400 a week. When you multiply that by a large cast, you're talking about a lot of money. So people always ask, will theater ticket prices go down? Theater ticket prices will go down when the cost of labor goes down, and there's as much chance of that happening as there is of the cow jumping over the moon. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But you also have to remember that if you go back far enough, back in the 30s, when the Roosevelt administration caused a minimum wage an hour law to be passed, the minimum wage was established at 40 cents an hour, and more than half the American labor force received compulsory wage increases because of the fact that most of them were making less than $16 a week. So things have changed dramatically, not just in cost, but in the cost of everything. The subway in New York used to be a nickel, now $1.15. So theater tickets have not risen any more than the price of any other commodity. As a matter of fact, according to most statistics we have, theater ticket prices have risen less than most of the competing commodities.
Well, the crew on a show, for instance, also can be, you negotiate, don't you, the amount of crew, so that affects the cost of a production.
Well, the cost of, well, actually, depending upon how good management is, management will either have a larger, the union is always looking to enhance the number of men employed on any show, and good management is trying to keep the number of men down to what they believe it should be. There's a whole host of union practices which enhance the number of men employed. You understand that there are 3 different working departments: property, electric, and carpenter. Now, if you bring a show in and you are not going to touch the electrics, or you're going to start hanging the electrics first, and there's nothing for the other 2 departments to do until the electrics are hung, for 5 days you'll be paying the other people, even though they'll only sit around the theater or maybe not even be in the theater. But you have to pay them, because once you start to take in, you have to employ the entire crew. So when you get involved in a show that, like Starlight Express, which has a 4 or 5 month take-in, the take-in cost for stagehand labor alone can approach 7 figures, just for the take-in. Now, when you go back, when Jean used to produce shows, she tells you she used to produce a play for $15,000 or $20,000 or $25,000. There's no such thing today. I mean, the $15,000 play now will cost $650,000, $750,000.
Is there any way of a producer negotiating with the unions involved to say that this comes in on this day, and then we do not need the carpenters until 5 days later, or whatever, until 2 weeks later? If you are knowledgeable and logical about this, is there no way of having the response from the unions more responsible?
Once you have 2 departments under the rules, you have to employ the 3 departments. And just to give you a story, I've been in communist China, I've been in communist Russia. They have the same rules. The same rules, I've asked them. They have the same feather bedding rules, if you want to call them feather bedding rules, that we have here. That you ask, I remember in China asking a house electrician, if there's no work in your department, and there's lots of work in their department, talking to the carpenter and where was I?
Prop.
The carpenter and the prop department. There's no work in their department. Will they help you in your department? Back yet, no question. They just won't do it. So that you have these rules. These rules are encrusted in our society. They are not local rules in New York. They are national rules. They apply all over the world, really. They're almost international rules. The likelihood of changing them, we try to change them all the time, but the likelihood of being successful is less than good.
Mm-hmm. What happens in Japan? Do you find the same thing, David?
I haven't been involved in the theater in Japan,
been.
so what Bernie says
is that true in Japan too? What about the
I really am not familiar with the particular rules in Japan. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been there, but I really haven't investigated that. But I do believe that their costs are. Look, we are sending Jerome Robbins' Broadway to Japan. Mm-hmm. And the cost of presenting the show is going to be every bit as much as it would be in America. The only thing about Japan is that the Japanese recognize what the costs are, and they're willing to pay $100 and $150 for a theater ticket.
How large are the theaters?
The theater's the same size as ours.
All right.
I can answer one thing from my experience in Russia and China, is that it is true what you say about the crews on shows. The only difference is at least the New York crew does tend to do their job and do it very, very well. What I've found, and this is amazing, when you have a guaranteed employment, as you do, these people are paid for 52 weeks a year. There's a great deal of people who are literally missing in action. I remember a tech rehearsal in Beijing where literally half of the people weren't there because they didn't feel like coming that day, which is instant, ulcer. Right? But at least the New York crews, when you do have them, they are there and they are working. But it is true. Is this true of musical too, Bernie? I mean, does that only grow by the amount of the musicians? Those same kind of figures of, let's say, $1,500 a week when you add the benefits?
But basically, all the unions follow the pattern. The stagehand contract will come up first, and the others will come along, and they'll want the same base wage. And there's a pattern, and labor costs in my day in the theater have increased by at least 1,000%. And there's, as long as the cost of commodities keeps going up, as long as they have to look, I don't know how many of you can remember, but I remember when, as I say, when the Subway was a nickel, when a pound of butter was 20 some odd cents, when a dozen eggs was 20 some odd cents, when a pound of meat was a quarter. All of these things have escalated 10, 12 times. What makes you think the theater tickets won't escalate by the same number?
Yeah.
There's something missing there that I don't understand. Really. I don't. Yeah. Let's go back to A Few Good Men.
Yeah. If I may, I'd like to, because although this is working in the theater, and we don't want to use that four-letter word film too much here, but how do you function, which would be, I think, interesting as a producer in the theater as opposed to a film producer? How does that work? What do you notice?
It's the same way. The producer's main responsibility, as I see it, is to identify the story and then to assemble those people, writers in the theater. The only difference in the theater is that the play comes to you fully written, whereas in film and in television, writers are for hire and they will work on scripts, but you pay them. The theater, you get a play fully realized as far as the playwright is concerned. The other functions are the same. The film producer must find the money. He or she must be present on the set, be involved in the rewrites, be involved with the director, be involved in casting, in all of those things. And unfortunately, the same union requirements in production are there, escalated. I mean, on a recent film in New York City, for example, the cost of drivers was $1,600,000 during the period of production. Those are just people who transport actors and other members of the crew. And as you all know, movie prices have gone up in cities like New York to $7 from 25 cents when I first went to movies. The position of film versus theater is interesting. In my own experience, I've been buying film rights, that is, to stage plays, for 40 years. And it's often, I think, gentlemen and ladies will agree, it's the film sale that is often the difference between profit and loss, except for these gargantuan musicals that, like Phantom and others, but it's the difference. And in selecting a play as a theater producer, I think about whether it has potential for film. Now, certain plays don't. For example, True is obviously a one-person show, and to open it up, so to speak, would be to destroy it. So that the Hollywood is very much part of the American and world theater. It's always been a partner in it, and as Bernie, as CBS, for example, totally financed My Fair Lady. And
Do you intend staying in the theater?
absolutely.
Actually,
More congenial, I might say.
Actually, and this is really where scripts come from, but Linda, at our break, indicated an interesting theory, which I wish you'd tell everybody, about the drop of real estate values. If it goes down, what's going to happen?
Well, I just thought that if, everybody's going, oh, the real estate values are dropping here in New York, I thought, oh, good, let them drop further, because then all those young people who would love to come to Broadway can come and afford to find a place to live, which they haven't been able to do for a long time, and a lot of talent hasn't come to this city. It's been going to cities like Chicago and other places with a lower entrance barrier, if you will.
That brings up an interesting point.
Yes.
And I'd like to ask Bernard Jacobs, is the theater to any extent recession-proof? I'll follow that by saying that growing up in the Depression was that was the golden age of the American theater, the 30s, during the Great Depression. But what impact have you noticed that this recession, depression has had on theater?
Well, in my opinion, first place, I think that theater is not necessarily adversely affected by recession, because compared to other methods of spending your money in order to provide you with entertainment or enjoyment or amusement, I still think theater is relatively cheap. So I don't think that theater is affected by depression. But of course, like everything else, if there is a recession, there's going to be less capital in order to produce plays, and theater will scrounge for it. But I do believe that people will go to see good plays, good musicals, good comedies, and they will not go to see those that they do not perceive to be good. I think Oscar Hammerstein is reported to have said the number of people who will not go to see a play they don't want to see is unlimited. I think that about sums it up.
We're now going to turn this over to questions, and I know that there are a lot of them, so please start.
Hi, this is open to the panel. My question is, why are there still so few females that are producers?
Bernie?
Me?
Sure.
Well,
Well, there's silence on that.
no.
Obviously,
As a
there
matter
is.
of fact,
They haven't an
I
answer.
think there are a considerable number of female producers, and certainly it is an area where there's no bias in any way inhibiting anybody from becoming a producer. All you have to do is open up an office and acquire a script, and
get
you're a
some money.
producer.
Get the money.
I think
That's
that's
You've started it.
Right,
You're
yeah.
Hi, this is for
Easy when I
Stuart.
did
Could
it.
you please clarify who's on the house payroll versus who's on the production payroll?
Sure. The actors are on the production payroll. The stage managers, company manager, press agent, general manager, what we call the production crew, who hold pink contracts, who are the people needed in addition to the house crew. In the case of our show, we have 2 people on production. We have 2 production crew, an electrician and a sound operator, in addition to the house heads. The other people who are run through payroll are the royalty participants, the author, the director, and so on from our office. The house payroll is the house crew, the house manager, the ushers, the treasurers, the stage doorman, the janitor, the engineers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, hello. This is for Mr. Brown and Mr. Jacobs. I'd like to know where you find new plays. Do you have scouts? Do they come only through agents? Obviously, you can't go to the theater every night and look.
Well,
I'm
in my
curious.
experience, they come through agents, and you also hear about plays because of readings of plays, particularly here in New York. That's the first indication I've had about this. You hear about them, they're being read.
Do you go to readings then?
Absolutely.
If someone tells
Someone
will you
usually
go to a
tells you to
reading?
get down and hear this, or you get constant invitations and you have to sift them out to hear plays and read them, and the word gets out about whether a play is good or not, and if you have the patience, you read some unsolicited plays, although lawyers tell you never to do that.
Do you have a script of staff to reading?
We have lots
readers?
of people that read plays. I read a lot of plays myself, too, as does Jerry and does Phil Smith. But we do not accept plays from unauthorized source. In other words, we don't accept plays from agents. We see lots of plays. We go all over the country looking at plays that are produced in all kinds of venues, and we're usually aware of everything that's going on. And out of that come the few plays that are successful.
Thank you.
My question is for the panel. Where are new producers coming from? What avenues are open to young people who might be interested in becoming producers? Are there apprentice programs, training programs in the universities that you're connected with, perhaps?
Go ahead.
This comes up often, it comes up in films. And there really, in my experience, there are no training programs. This is not an executive job. This is a job for an entrepreneur. This is somebody who's born with a flair. He or she may be an usher, someone with a dream of being in the theater. And as Mr. Jacobs have said, you don't even have to open an office. You have to find a play, and you have to persuade people to read it. You have to be able to raise the money for it, and everybody has a different way of doing it. But this is true of film producers. They're people with endless determination, incredible insensitivity to rejection, and also a study of the theater, a study of plays, a knowledge, something, and they're there to be read in the public library. They're there to be seen at the cut-rate ticket. You can go out and see plays, and you have to know your business and then decide to be one. You don't get paid until the play is on and you've raised the money and you've recouped it.
If I may,
Just in
Mr.
response
Jacobs.
to that, too, Jerry and I have been conducting classes at Yale and at Columbia, which is basically on the business of the theater, and we believe, and I see out there very often, lots of would-be producers and would-be managers and people all over the country who were our students.
Are you developing people to continue the Shubert Organization?
We believe we have people.
Right.
George, doesn't this touch upon some of the things that you do, the O'Neill, on training? And did you take in training for producers as well, other than what David has said as knowledge and instinct? Knowledge, I think, seems to be the most important thing there. But what else?
Well, we do try at the O'Neill Center not only to develop, obviously, playwrights and people who write musicals and teams that write musicals, but also in our training program for students, we do try to indicate that there's more to life than just acting, and that people who have the entrepreneurial instinct, even as young people, that can be harnessed to go on. And we do that at our National Theatre Institute. And then I pick them up at Yale, like Linda.
Yes.
Yes, Linda was a student of mine.
These are two of my
And mine, yes, we are
professors
two.
here. I don't have to raise my hand for them anymore, though.
My question is for Mr. Jacobs and for Mr. Brown. In an age now where you have Producer X not only dropping helicopters but chandeliers on his audience, can we please discuss the Broadway Alliance, what it is and whether or not you believe it'll work to bring Broadway production costs and Broadway ticket prices down to more of an affordable level?
Mr. Jacobs is the authority on that.
What is the Broadway Alliance?
The Broadway Alliance is a program under which various unions have agreed to cooperate to reduce their costs, and producers have agreed to produce plays at lower budgets and to charge lower admission fees, low admission prices. So far, I think you should check with the league and see how many plays are going to be produced under that program. And the answer really is that if you have a play which you perceive to be a hit, why are you going to do it under the restrictions of the Broadway Alliance? Why are you going to agree to charge $25 a ticket in the $45 market? You're only going to do it if you feel that if you have grave doubts about your play, in all likelihood, or you can't raise the money. And in my experience, if you have something which is potentially a hit, you never have much trouble raising the money. But we'll see what happens with the Broadway Theatre Alliance. We all hope it works.
Will that go into effect next season? Is that 1991? Or
it'll start with this season.
Starting now. Is there any theater that has booked a play?
None of our theaters have been booked. I think there's a Jujamson theater that's booked.
I'm working on one that Robert Whitehead is planning to produce under the Broadway Alliance. It's a play called Speed of Darkness by, excuse me, Steve Tesich. It was done at the Goodman a couple of years ago, and Bob Whitehead's planning to bring it to Broadway this season under the Broadway Alliance.
I think so. Thank you. Thank you. Next.
Hi, yes, this is a question for the panel. How does one go about finding situations or training programs for people that are interested in working in theater management or theater production?
I think Stuart.
Yes, well, I guess I will pick that up with another hat that I wear as co-chairing the program at Yale. There is an alliance which can be, you can write to, Yale and Columbia have programs, but they're all over the country in arts administration, out of which sometimes, often come producers. We have them at the O'Neill Center. There is a book, and there's an association, as there is almost in everything, of managers or management programs in the arts that is available, and I'll tell you that after the panel. We can sit down. I'll give you the exact address, but they do exist with all of the arts programs around the country, and they're in many universities.
Thank you.
I think we have time for just one more question.
This is to the panel at large. How many projects can you tackle, or can you be working on at any given time?
Many, in my opinion, as many as you can find.
Why don't we start with Linda and go all the way around? What does the agency handle? How many?
The agency handles a lot. As an individual account person, you could probably handle maybe two musicals and a couple of plays, but that would require a lot of backup because this is very labor intensive. A lot of work goes into it.
I misinterpreted the question. I thought you meant how many projects could a producer handle at once. And that's not what was intended.
Well, it would be to anybody in whatever your capacity.
Oh, well, there are so few things that really excite one in this world as time goes on that we'll take everything we can get that's good.
Jean, what about you? I'll handle this.
I used to handle 6 plays, which was as many as the union would allow you to handle, with a lot of assistance, of course, and about 25 different individual artists in my publicity management business and producing.
I think the Schuberts are pretty much in that category too, aren't you, Bernie? You handle them.
Well, we must produce 6, 7 plays a year, but of course it all depends upon the amount of effort and money each project requires. I mean, it's just as difficult to produce one Miss Saigon for $11 million as it is to produce 10 or 12 plays. It's a big business.
Thank you.
How about you as manager?
Very, very much. I'm sorry this happens all the time, where I just have to say, forgive me for interrupting you. You are more than a few good men. Behind you stands so much knowledge and so much care about the theater. I'm terribly grateful to you for being here. You know, the American Theater Wing is a service organization, and this is just one more program, and these seminars are going to universities across the country. I'm Isabel Stevenson. I'm president of the American Theater Wing, and I thank you all for being here. Thank you very much.
Agency of Serino Coyne, and right next to me I have, and right next to me I have, now these men are the producer, and that's the producer's